Not convinced it ain't no acting or accident what the track emits. You strapped with gas that you ain't even practiced with. The fact is,
behind the sounds of a million screeching autistic wrestling fans lies 3-count commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today we'll be talking about SmackDown from March the 11th, 2022. Apparently something major happened and somebody got their name changed, because that never happens ever in the WWE. No one ever gets their name changed. It never occurs. But first, news and notes. We're going to go to an interview in vulture.com where Kelly Campbell, president of Peacock, had this to say about the Peacock WWE relationship. She says, WWE has been an incredibly successful partnership for Peacock since launch. We invested in an incredible fan base that provides us with the opportunity to bring those fans back time and time again with the massive live events that are part of WWE franchise. We have WrestleMania, in fact, returning on April the 3rd. This is already one of our biggest live events of the year, and we have an original series that I'm super excited about featuring John Cena coming out later this year called WWE Evil that I think will bring a fun new take on the space for this audience. So Peacock is actually pretty excited. I know a lot of people have been floating the idea that Peacock was going to be somehow upset about what WWE is doing or has done via their views or whatever the case may be. Again, we don't know what metrics they're looking at or what those things are, because a lot of that stuff is kind of hidden. It's really weird. I don't understand why they would do that, but there's also a kind of a reason why you would do that, because there are people out there who are, just straight up bad actors who are choosing to take things in a negative way. But the Peacock president seems to be all right, unless she was blowing smoke up, everybody's butts. She seemed to be doing all right. So that's one. What else do we got here? Oh, before I go into the next news and notes, I want to talk about WWE Evil, because I did see that it's an 8-episode series featuring, they're going to highlight a specific heel in one episode and kind of talk about that heel. And I had an idea to do a similar series on my channel a long time ago. Probably some of you who've been around a long time know that I used to do these sort of archetypal storytelling videos back when I had a lot of time. And I was going to do them based off of the 7 deadly sins, basically, greed, envy, lust, that kind of thing. And it seemed like a good idea until I started doing the research, and I was like, oh, this is exhausting. And I only had maybe 800 subscribers or something like that when I had the idea. Now I'm kind of like, so it felt like WWE copied my homework, even though they couldn't have known that I was actually going to do that. So this might actually get me an opportunity to actually do something in doing reviews for these episodes and kind of expanding upon them. So I was thinking about doing that, but it all depends on what they actually do, because I like talking about baby faces and heels and structure of storytelling and archetypes and how characters would act and how characters should act and this kind of thing. I enjoy that part of wrestling more than the sweaty athletics of it, which, I can take or leave depending on how much of it is. And it wasn't a lot of that on this episode of SmackDown anyway. But, so that was an interesting show. So, Samoa Joe, let's talk about Samoa Joe, about how Samoa Joe managed to still be in the video game, despite the fact that he was fired. This ought to be very interesting. So, Samoa Joe explains how he was still in the video game. So, he's talking to Kinda Funny Games Daily. And he says, built into our contract is a licensing agreement. I am Samoa Joe. That's my trademark that I own. For me, it's a little different than most guys because I have a licensing agreement and we negotiated our price based off that. It's essentially the same type of thing with guys who don't have their own name. When you leave there, the character is still there for their properties. And then he says, talking about why don't they just put everybody on the game? He says, quote, there has been efforts at various times to make that a reality. Various companies and various games. It's really just a licensing nightmare to try to track everyone down. Now, I did have a subscriber that asked me to talk about how wrestlers are paid. Wrestlers are typically given a salary, but in addition to that, there are other types of agreements that they have to sign, such as intellectual property, as Samoa Joe's talking about here, licensing agreements. Now, a licensing agreement is when you have a intellectual property that you own that you are going to let someone else use, like the name Samoa Joe. The name and face of Samoa Joe is owned by Samoa Joe, which means he has to sign it over to WWE for the length of his contract. That allows WWE to monetize his name and likeness without being sued by him. Understand? So he's going to negotiate his contract based off of the value of his name and likeness that he owns, that he is bringing to the table as he signs his contract. This should be something that you could think about in terms of why a certain wrestler has their name changed. Maybe for some reason they don't want to use their birth name and they don't want to sign it over. It could be a situation where WWE just wants to own the intellectual property because they have a big idea and they think it may be very big in terms of merchandising. For instance, Sin Cara, he was known mostly as Mystico, I think he was known as Mystico or Mystices in Mexico. That gimmick was owned by AAA, I believe. So they had to rename him. And so they came up with Sin Cara. And because they owned the name Sin Cara, they can make somebody else Sin Cara. This is how you can have two Undertakers, two Kanes, a fake Diesel and a fake Razor Ramon. Because those properties are owned by WWE, not owned by the wrestler. So in the sense, Samoa Joe owns the name Samoa Joe. AJ Styles owns the name AJ Styles. So he gets probably a bigger cut of his merchandising than most other wrestlers would. This is why WWE really likes to change things if they can. They would probably prefer to because they would get a bigger cut because they would own it. So, but this is very interesting. So likely WWE was kind of in a bind with some of these wrestlers who may have owned certain pieces of the intellectual property. And they might have been in violation of some kind of contract if they took them out of the game. But it also seems like at some point it just got too late to take people out. And then with all the name changes and call-ups and all kind of stuff, it was like, how much damage could you possibly do to the goddamn game at this point? Like they're going to do all kind of hella damage to the game. Now, from how wrestlers get paid, salaries, merchandising, I don't think anybody gets a piece of the gates anymore. That's not really, I don't think that's a thing. So yeah, that doesn't make, or pay-per-view points. That doesn't make sense either because they don't have any pay-per-views. So I would guess it would just be merchandising and your downside guarantee. Downside guarantee would be if you sign a contract for $3 million, that means Vince McMahon is going to pay you at least $3 million. And then you will get on top of your merchandising, whatever else you're owed. You sold a bunch of t-shirts. That's just on top of your $3 million. You were on a bunch of posters. That's on top of your $3 million. So that's kind of how that works. Now we're going to talk about Vince McMahon and Nick Khan. Talking about their money was put into the SEC filings. And of course, Wrestling Journalist was all over that. So Vince McMahon, Mr. Vince McMahon, our chairman and chief executive officer, was set at an annual rate of $2 million. For calendar year 2022, his target management incentive plan bonus was set at 250% of his salary, and his grant of performance stock units has a target value of $11 million. So Vince McMahon makes $2 million a year. The salary of Mr. Nick Khan, our president and chief revenue officer, was set at an annual rate of $1.2 million. For calendar 2022, his bonus target management incentive plan bonus was set at 158% of his salary, and his grant of performance stock units has a target value of $3.575 million. In addition, the second tranche of his sign-on equity grant to be made in September 2022, as described in our prior filings, has been increased by $7.5 million. So, and then some guys went and bought some shares. I think Kevin Dunn went and bought some shares of stock. Now, I know it may sound weird that Vince McMahon only makes $2 million a year, but you could think about that in terms of, again, downside guarantees. He makes less than the wrestlers per, but Vince honestly makes far more money because he has stock options. And so when people start saying like Vince is a billionaire, he makes all this money. Again, Vince McMahon owns most of the stock of WWE. That's where most of his wealth is. Most of his wealth is not in income. And that is the same for almost all CEOs. CEOs almost never get paid that much money. The difference is going to be in what they own. And what they own usually is going to be a majority of the stock of the company that they're the CEO of. Like Jeff Bezos. So like a lot of his money is in Amazon stock. So that's the difference between income and wealth. So when you're talking to people and they're talking about income inequality and all that shit, if they're talking about wealth and they're using it in terms of income, they don't know what they're talking about. Income and wealth are two different things. What Tony Khan is worth is different from what Tony Khan actually makes. All right. That's two different things. So if somebody says, and I've dealt with this before, Shad Khan could buy WWE twice over because look at his net worth. It's like, yeah, he would have to sell all of his companies in order to get that cash and then be able to buy WWE. He have to borrow money first. He doesn't have that liquid. Liquid means in cash. It means money actually in your pocket, money that's actually in your bank account. What he would have to do is go through cashing out all his stock options, which would plummet the price of the stock in doing so. If he was to just cash out and start selling a bunch of stock, people would be like, wait a minute, what are you doing? And then they start selling a bunch of stock, so that would crash the cost of the stock. So they wouldn't do that anyway. But there's a difference between wealth and income. That's still a hefty thing because Vince was doing this shit for so long. If he only made $2 million a year, but he's been making it for 40 goddamn years, that's $80 million. And that's baseline before we start talking about all the little extras that he probably earned, and bonuses and all that kind of stuff. So that's very interesting. I know a lot of people kind of rolled their eyes at the concept of Vince McMahon only making like $2 million a year. It's like, no, he makes far more than that because he has stock options and a bunch of bonuses and all kind of stuff. But, you're not going to just cut him a check for $11 million or some crazy stuff like that. Come on. That's just absurd. All right, so let's finally get into SmackDown. Brock Lesnar starts the show, says that Roman Reigns changed the rules. He drew first blood. You don't draw first blood on Brock Lesnar and live to tell about it. Now he says he wants blood for blood with Roman Reigns, but Roman ain't there, according to Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman says that Roman ain't here, so I want this temperature lowered. And Brock says, okay, well, if Roman's not here, then who's going to protect you? And Heyman was like, about that. And then Brock was on him. Brock chased him, and then he bowled over a bunch of guys trying to get to Paul. Paul running was so hilarious. Paul running was funny as hell. And Brock still almost caught him. It took for like random goons to like grab Brock and slow him down for, Paul to be able to get away. Well, Paul escaped Brock, but the chase scene was hilarious. It was great. It was a high point of the show, that's for sure. And this was a down episode of SmackDown as far as I was concerned. But this was a high point, So Brock got stitches from MSG. He's looking to give stitches to Roman. Now, this is an effective use of blood. I remember I was, kind of pitching a bitch about AEW using so much blood on their Revolution show. But to me, it just felt excessive. This was an effective use of blood. One person bled in the segment. And now they're actually using the blood, what little blood there was, to hype the angle, to increase the story. Brock is saying, look, it was all fun and games when we was fucking around. But now you took it to the next level. You decided to give me stitches. Okay. Since you want to do that, we're going to take it to the next level. And Roman is not there to meet that challenge. He's like, all right, I'm out of here. But I'm guessing there probably will be blood in their match at WrestleMania. And there probably should be, if we're being honest. But Brock destroying guys as he ran is hilarious. I love that. Now, let's talk about Butch. Everybody's talking about Butch. So Ridge Holland and Sheamus is there. And I'm not even going to do my Sheamus voice this time. I'm just going to say this. Sheamus said that they made the ATV look better. and that they improve things around here. That's what they do. And then he says and then he had sledgehammers, him and Ridge Holland, they both had sledgehammers. And they said, so that's why you brought these sledgehammers. He's like, oh, we didn't bring these sledgehammers. We brought something more dangerous than a sledgehammer. We brought our friend. And he brought out Butch. And he said that y'all may know him under different names, but we know him as Butch. Now, before we start talking about the name Butch, we probably should mention that they did something to his skin. Like, he looks significantly less like an oatmeal cream pie this week. When you look at his face, it looks rather smooth, doesn't it? Like, you look at Pete Dunne, man, he used to have that real bad skin. You know, now he cleared his skin up a little bit. I think that was a lot of makeup, dog. I think they make them up, you know. Now, was not pressed at all by the name Butch. They already have a Butch. They got two Butches in the WWE universe already. You got Butch Reed, and you've got Butch of the Bushwhackers. So I don't know. That's the part I don't really get. I don't know why we have to have three Butches in the WWE universe. We already got wrestlers named Butch. The problem here really is that people hate change. If you change anything, people flip out. You could change the color of the ropes. People would just start acting. You ruined everything. You ruined every single thing. That's why I called it the artistic screeching of wrestling fans. You change anything, they're screaming and howling and just pitching a bitch. Yes, we know that he was Pete Dunne in WWE for the last 6 years. And they kind of tipped their hat to that by saying, you know him as something else, but we know him as Butch. And that's what we're going to call him. We're going to call him Butch. Now, is Butch a bad name? It's just a name. You know, the name is what you make it. Most people aren't going to know who Pete Dunne was because they didn't watch NXT UK. Now, they probably did watch some NXT, and he did do some crossovers. And it was weird for Pat McAfee to be calling him Butch. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's just a name. Who cares? It's all about how you perform and whether you can get it over. My second issue here is that Butch is already more over than Pete Dunne ever was. I never see Pete Dunne, people talk about Pete Dunne like this before, you know, and in a way, mocking him actually should motivate him, because you gotta crawl over this glass and come out the other side. He is being positioned as being the smallest but fiercest member of the bunch. You know, with the way he viciously attacked Kofi after the match, and then the big boys had to pull him off, and you know, he just really wanted to get to him like the pit bull of the group. That's a good thing. That means that they're utilizing the intensity that he had as the Bruiserweight, which is a stupid name anyway, by the way. The Bruiserweight. There's not even a Cruiserweight division anymore. And people are like, oh, I'm going to keep calling him the Bruiserweight. Pete Dunne. Like, what are you talking about? There's no Cruiserweight division. You know? Like, this guy, if he'd come up to the main roster as regular old Pete Dunne, dressed like fucking Andre the Giant, in a small man's body. You got like 5 foot fucking 130 pounds with pizza face. That guy's fucking dead in the water. Now, Butch might not be the best thing in the world. It's a lot less plain than Pete Dunne showing up and bending fingers without any context whatsoever. Now we're looking at this guy like he's part of the fellas of Donnybrook Lane. The boys of Donnybrook Lane. Some people have said they look like the Little Rascals. So somebody apparently Googled the Little Rascals. And if apparently somebody wore a hat in the past, and you kind of wearing a similar hat right now, that's where the idea came from. There couldn't have been anywhere else where people wore those hats before. Somebody told me about this thing called the Peaky Blinders. I had no idea this thing existed. And this apparently is the real inspiration for the characters. Is that it was an English gang. I thought it was gangs in New York, personally. And I've been calling Sheamus gangs in New York for like 2 years. For starters, a lot of people are really tripping on the hats and everything. It's like Sheamus been wearing that hat for 2 years. His little hat, he been wearing that shit for 2 years. I've been making fun of it for 2 years. Ridge Holland been wearing the little newsboy hat since he was in NXT in UK. What? See, that's the thing that be flipping me out. It's all people who say that they're super fans, but it's not until certain points that they think things are silly or whatever. It's like Ridge Holland has been wearing that hat since he was on NXT UK. You know, now all they did was Pete Dunne wore the hat. And all of a sudden it's a Silly Little Rascals hat. It's like, come on, dog. You know, I get it. You don't like it. But if a bunch of people who already don't watch the show and already don't like it, don't like something, I don't see the big deal is. So what? This is why Vince said he doesn't listen to the small, biased group. It's like people don't even give it, they don't even understand what's going on. They don't, not even trying to. Again, people just hate change. They changed something. His name. The fact that he's still, you know, intense. He's in a trios, or I keep calling them trios. He's in a trio. Fucking AEW got me saying trios all the time. He's in a 3-man stable with Sheamus and Ridge Holland. A stable that's based off intensity and fighting and the kind of thing that really he can really get over because it plays to Pete Dunne's strengths with his intensity. Everybody missed that. A bunch of people missed that. They just want to talk about Butch. They don't talk about the name. I don't give a fuck about his name. I don't give a fuck about Pete Dunne. Did Pete Dunne have good matches? Yes. Do I care? No. You could erase every fucking Pete Dunne match off the network and it's still well worth the money I'm paying for it. You can erase every fucking Pete Dunne match that ever existed and I wouldn't give a fuck. The fact of the matter is the dude had no character before. He actually does have a character now. That's going to be the big difference. Can he portray Butch? The answer is the Butch character seems to be played into what we know the guy can do. And that is be an absolute underhanded scumbag, you know, dirty fighting bastard. He seems like he can be able to do that. It's not none of this, no matter what name you give him, he's not going to grow. He's still a fucking midget. He's still pasty. He's still the baddest man in NXT and all that shit. He's all of that still. All right? He's all of that still. They just have a different name. And he's wearing different clothes, I guess. Now, I don't know anything about the Peaky Blinders. I don't have no idea what's going on there. But I did watch Gangs of New York. And that's how I got it. Because I loved Gangs of New York. I thought it was great. And I love Sheamus. Sheamus is hilarious. Not that big of a fan of Rich Holland anymore. You know, after what happened with Big E. Now, I'm not saying it's completely his fault, you know, but Ridge Holland has to have a history of these mistakes, you know, of hurting guys and being hurt and not quite being ready for prime time. This trio might end up being a duo pretty soon, as they probably, you know, might want to do something with this Ridge Holland issue. So the New Day, Big E and Kofi were defeated by Sheamus and Ridge Holland when Butch interfered. Outside the ring is when the tragedy occurred as Holland tried to do an overhead belly to belly suplex, a move that he's done plenty of times. And he's botched it more than once. I think he's actually messed it up more than once. On this time, he actually messed it up and threw Big E. He didn't get enough air under Big E. Big E was a big dude, probably bigger and heavier than what Ridge Holland expected. He didn't go all the way over, spiked Big E on his head. It looked very ugly. Big E was laid flat for several seconds. I thought the worst. I was like, oh boy, that's not good. Then you're hearing from the inside the arena that Big E's been stretchered out. And then for 2 hours, that's really all you heard is that Big E was stretched out of the building. And then I saw somebody say that he put up the big thumb as he was going out the building, and I was like, okay, cool, you know, at least he can move his arms and his fingers and everything. There was a video that was posted later where Big E says that he can move all of his digits, but he still does have a broken neck. That means he will not be there for WrestleMania. He ain't gonna make WrestleMania. So, as bad as Butch is, and as kind of silly as it is, the real tragedy here is that Big E got hurt. So that means whatever plans there were for Butch is ruined anyway. Because it was more than likely going to lead to Xavier Woods making his big return and it being Sheamus and his boys, the boys of Donnybrook Lane, fighting the New Day at WrestleMania in some type of maybe street fight or something like that. It would have been very fun. It would have been a great highlight for Pete Dunne's career for have his very first match at WrestleMania to be against the New Day, who WWE thinks is the greatest tag team of all time. That could have been fun. That could have been interesting. That would have made Butch a bigger name than Pete Dunne almost immediately. It would have been the same guy. His checks would definitely show that there's a difference between being Butch and being Pete Dunne. Because the Butch paychecks are probably going to be a lot better. And, you know, it is what it is. And so, ultimately, do I like the Butch thing? No. But I like that I'm not as... Look, they've been doing this for 40 years. They've been doing this for 40 years. Vince McMahon has been changing people's names for 40 fucking years. Like somebody online said that, you know, Tony Atlas was a well-known name. They changed him to Saba Simba. Tito Santana was a well-known name. They made him El Matador. Well, yeah, they did exactly that. They did. And those were different reasons, though. Like, Tony Atlas was kind of washed. And so was Tito Santana. They were washed. And they thought by changing their names and giving them new gimmicks, they could freshen them up. They did this a lot in the 90s. You know, with Charles Wright. You know, that's why he had so many different gimmicks. He was the Godfather. He was Kama. He was this guy. He was that guy. Because they figured, hey, once this thing run its course, we'll send them away for a little while, bring them back under a different name. You know, that was a different mentality in the past. Nowadays, these kooky names and everything is just a way of fucking with guys. And I said this when I talked about Gunther, you know. It might have been a thing where Pete Dunne maybe didn't want to license his own name. He kind of wanted to own his own name, and they kind of came up with this compromise where he would come up with his own character. Some people have said Butch is what his nickname already or whatever. I was like, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't care. Ultimately, it's not going to make me enjoy Pete Dunne more or less. I just have to remember another goddamn name. You know, everybody hates these names, and then they eventually get used to them, and then somebody else comes along, they change their name, and all of a sudden, oh no! This is the worst possible world! And he changed Tommaso Ciampa's name, now he's Tommy C. Or whatever the hell. But you know they're going to change Tommaso. What the fuck does that mean? It might just be Tommaso, you know, or whatever. Something silly. You know, they do shit like this. And people get so invested and they get so turned around about it that it's absolutely hilarious. Even though it's not really funny, you know, but it's still hilarious that people get so turned around about this kind of stuff. But the plan was more than likely a 6-man tag, probably street fight type of situation with the boys of Donnybrook Lane and the New Day. And now that's probably going to end up being a tag team match. And, you know, I'm guessing Xavier Woods still going to come back. He's probably going to have to come back sooner. And they may have to replace Ridge Holland with Butch. But so hopefully he still gets his WrestleMania match. He can still get his WrestleMania paycheck. You know, and Butch be damned. Go out. Look, here's the thing. Everybody hates Butch. It's your job to go down there and shove Butch down their throat. That's your job. Your job is to go in there and make Butch a name that everybody talks about and everybody remembers. Everybody hates Cesaro too. Everybody hated Dolph Ziggler. Everybody hated Finn Balor. Everybody hates every name change pretty much in history. Rusev, they hated them all. There were people chanting Husky Harris at Bray Wyatt when he changed his name. It is what it is. You just got to live with it. You know? Make it work. This is a prime opportunity. Sheamus is a guy who is consistently pushed. He's very rarely like a job guy, this Sheamus. He wins more often than he loses. Even when he's not featured, he manages to win more than he loses. So if you're hanging out with him, you're doing okay, you know? So that's all I really can say about the Butch thing. Not necessarily a big fan of it, but it doesn't necessarily burn my cookies either. I don't really care that much. Now let us move on for the rest of this show. Finally. All right. So Sami Zayn, Johnny Knoxville, this thing continues to heat up. Sami Zayn apparently has been stalking Johnny Knoxville on his phone. So Johnny Knoxville found out what Sami Zayn's phone number is and sent a blimp over Los Angeles with his phone number on it. Now Sami Zayn is getting harassed with text messages from dirty, disgusting jackass fans, and it made him not be able to focus on his Intercontinental Championship match that he has tonight. But he says that in honesty, Ricochet's not that good. Since Johnny Knoxville isn't here to help him, he's probably going to lose. And this leads us to the main event of the evening, where Ricochet defeats Sami Zayn in a very good Intercontinental Championship match. Ricochet wins with the 630 clean, great finish. I was thinking to myself, right as Big E was getting hurt, I was like, okay, who's going to draw Ricochet at WrestleMania? And I first thought, okay, now that Sheamus' match is probably going to have to be canceled, maybe it'll be Sheamus. And then I said to myself, you know what? Not really, because, you can still do the tag team thing. It might not be a 6-man, it might just be a tag team match now. Okay, that's still fine. It's still fine. But there needs to be somebody there to challenge Ricochet for the Intercontinental title. Who is a top name that is that is not accounted for on SmackDown? They seemingly have something for most of the guys on SmackDown. I can't think of anybody. Now it would be a good place to put somebody who was re-debuting. Nah. I'm not going to suggest Cody Rhodes versus Ricochet. I think that everybody who's fantasy booking Cody into stuff is wishful thinking. But Ricochet does need to have an opponent, for WrestleMania. It does need to happen. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head who I would put in this spot, but somebody needs to be there. But the Sami Zayn, Johnny Knoxville stuff continues to be kind of fun. I like how it's sort of comedy, but it's also, kind of serious too, so. Drew McIntyre was supposed to team with the Viking Raiders to wrestle Happy Corbin, Madcap Moss, and Jinder Mahal. Instead, the Viking Raiders got jumped backstage and beat up very badly by the heels. The Viking Raiders have had more canceled matches in the last couple of weeks than they've had actual matches. So the match did not occur. Drew McIntyre took his sweet ass time getting down there to try to help them. Instead, he got jumped by, quote, the happy folks. And I can't believe Michael Cole started saying that. God damn, what's wrong with that man? Anyway, they jumped Drew McIntyre in the eye, beat him down. He was able to fight back. This whole thing here was Drew McIntyre getting beat up and then fighting back, making his own comeback. This was one of Bill Watts' tricks to getting the Junkyard Dog over, is that nobody comes and saves him. He has to save himself. So in this situation, you had Drew McIntyre fight off 4 heels by himself. Shanky's a giant, by the way. And he got fought off by Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre fighting off 4 guys by himself. And somebody was like, we should let the heels get over and get some heat. And I said, well, yes. Somebody like he's getting the Hogan, the John Cena treatment. It's like he's a top babyface. Now, second babyface because after Brock. But here's the thing. They're telling a story that Drew is likely to kill Happy Corbin. That's the story that you're trying to tell. And what better way to tell that story than having Drew fight back against everybody? And he can't be stopped by this whole menagerie of idiots. They can't stop him. He's going to get his hands on Corbin, and Corbin is trying to flee. So we're telling the story right now that Corbin is going to get his comeuppance, and that there is likely nothing he can do to stop Drew McIntyre. And in telling that story, Drew McIntyre making his own comeback makes sense. Of course, within the story, you probably should have the Viking Raiders recover and come back and help him, But I don't know, man. WWE does really, really weird things when it comes to how they choose to position babyfaces and heels and how they choose to present them. It's so bizarre and it's so unnecessary sometimes. But Drew McIntyre fighting off 4 babyfaces, 4 heels by himself is just maddening. 4 big guys too. Maddening. Just can't stop him. you can't stop him. He's been doing that for 2 years too. This has been a Drew thing since 2020. I'm going to fight everybody by myself and win. It's just insane. It's insane. And it does get people over until folks start noticing. And it's easier for you to do this to a Happy Corbin because nobody cares about him. If it were heels that anybody cared about, people would have been complaining. But since it's Happy Corbin, nobody cares. All right, speaking of nobody cares, Ronda Rousey is out here. And she's talking about calling me a one-trick pony. Oh, I gotta say it with the same enthusiasm Ronda Rousey said it. Calling me a one-trick pony is like calling Mike Tyson a one-trick pony because he only wins with punching people. I got 1,000 ways to get to that arm bar, but I've been trying to improve and refine the ankle lock, the move that I learned from my first mentor in this ring, Kurt Angle. I was like, my God. Somebody said that you might as well let Siri cut the promo. I was like, yes, Alexa, the fucking Amazon device that they trapped you into putting into your house that's recording everything you fucking say. They yes, I'm a conspiracy theorist. That shit's recording everything you say. If it can respond to you, then it's listening, right? Don't put that shit in your house. So that thing could have cut a better promo than this robot broad that we got here. This was awful. You would never think that Ronda Rousey had done voice acting before in her life. And she has voice acted for Sonya Blade in Mortal Kombat. And how could she ever? She is noticeably worse now than she was before. She is worse. Somehow she went away and got worse. She's awful. No personality, no passion, no character. I fucking hate Ronda Rousey. I hate Ronda Rousey right now. I hate her so much. She bores me so much. This match with Charlotte is going to be the shits. Even if it's technically, it can go in there and pull a Dynamite Kid versus Bret Hart style match, and I'll still probably find it fucking boring. There's no personality from Ronda Rousey. None. And Charlotte has to try to work with this slog. And she's not the best in this situation either. Because, she's kind of, she's going to be doing the JLB. So Charlotte not in the best headspace about this whole thing. So in any event, they argue about who's going to be tapping who out. And Charlotte says, last week you took advantage of me because I was wearing heels and I wasn't paying attention. And it was a bunch of shit. So she said, you have to tap me out when it matters. And to me, you're still a one-trick pony. I don't care about your ankle lock. I'm going to humiliate you. So they argue about who's going to submit who. And I was like, okay, they're going to make this a submission match, try to make it the main event. That would help it. But nah, it's still not the main event. After the end of the show, so kind of a post-match, post-show thing, Charlotte and Ronda Rousey are fighting backstage. They're trying to recreate the first main event scene where Charlotte kneed Ronda Rousey in the face. This time, Charlotte is fighting off men too. She's beating up the men. Ronda is also beating up the men. They're bumping Jamie Noble all over the place. Then Charlotte suplexes Ronda Rousey on top of the car. And then she stretches Ronda on the car. And I was like, oh, this was actually nice. Because they got that beautiful shot of, Charlotte stretching her face. And I was like, I like this. Now, this is good. That promo segment, absolute rubbish. But this is good. I like this. This is good. This is good. Thumbs up. They didn't save it. It's not like this scene all of a sudden made everything else they did good. This scene was good. If this is the match is going to be, I like it. If the match is going to be trying to force me to like Ronda Rousey and get behind her, nah, man. And yes, I know that, she's smiling more. I don't care that she's smiling more. She's garbage. Absolute basura. That's how I feel about this. Basura. How you say garbage in Spanish? That's shit, right? Basura is shit, whatever. Sasha Banks and Naomi defeated Shayna Baszler and Natalya. Zelina Vega and Carmelo at ringside. None of this mattered. Sasha Banks and Naomi came out to Sasha Banks' theme. So I guess they said Mongo was complaining that Sasha didn't get her own music. Now we're going to give Naomi her own music. Okie dokie. Okie dokie. The Usos came out there and said he had no worthy contenders. Boogs and Nakamura limped out there. They challenged the Usos to a tag team title match at WrestleMania. The Usos laughed and said, no. and plus Boogs was hurt. And then they changed their mind and said, oh, well, you know what? If Boogs can beat Jey Uso injured with one leg, then we'll give you guys a tag team title shot. Boogs then agreed. And then after the bell rang, he unwrapped his leg and showed that his leg was fine. Boogs then did all of his strength moves, power stuff, and won the match. So they will begin a tag team title match. The Usos then jumped both of them and beat them down. Oh my God. The tag team title matches, let's say, seem to be a good way of hiding a lot of people. You know, like even I, it was my, mind more towards storytelling. Am in favor of just hiding people you have nothing to do. I don't have anything to do with Sasha Banks or Rhea Ripley right now. Not going to have them wrestle each other. That would, destroy one of the characters that we kind of trying to build to the future. We're going to just hide them in the tag team division for a little while. Just for this match. Just for this show. We're going to hide them in the tag team division. This seems like ripe, fertile ground for us to just shove more people in the tag team division. Like the women's match went from being one team versus one team to now a triple threat match. And people have said it's going to be a fatal 4-way with Natalya and Shayna Baszler ended up being added to that match. Okay. But my thing is, why Sonya Deville ain't wrestling on this show? See, that there's still so many people that we could have been doing stuff with. And it seems to me like it would make sense for us to do more. And I think that instead of doing a corny fatal 4-way match, that you probably should do a ladder match. I know look, I would rather it be a ladder match, not the women. I'm talking about the guys. I would rather one of these tag team title matches become a ladder match, maybe a winner take all ladder match versus, the fatal 4-way concept. Because I don't like that. And I think it's not good, man. It's not good. And then the Usos said there's no challengers, and it's Boogs and Nakamura. It's like, what about Los Lotharios? Where the fuck did they go? Look, I know Los Lotharios are also heels, but come on. They're not going to, you can't put everybody on WrestleMania. You can't. But you have to be smart and judicious in the way. Like, you're not going to put Jinder Mahal and Shanky on WrestleMania. Fucking Happy Corbin shouldn't be on the show either, by the way. If we're ranking people who shouldn't be on the show, Dominic Mysterio shouldn't be on the fucking show either. It's just is what it is. There's going to be people who are going to be on the card who probably shouldn't be there. If you're going to try to hide people in these matches, at least make the matches interesting. All right? You can make it interesting by making a ladder match or something to that effect. But at the same time, I don't want a bunch of fatal 4-way matches on this show because there's 2 sets of tag team titles. I don't want that. 3, because there's a women's tag team belts. I don't see why we need Natalya, though. I'm sorry. I will replace her with Sonya Deville. Why not have Sonya Deville and Shayna Baszler? Like, Shayna Baszler with Sonya Deville's heavy. Like, that makes sense. Natalya, I don't know. Come on. Fuck out of here. And then I hear that Lita is actually making herself available if WWE wants her. It's like, okay, well, great. Now you can put Lita on the show and you could have, somebody wrestle Lita. I mean, Becky's already beaten her, but you can have her wrestle someone else. That seemed like a perfect vehicle for Sasha Banks. I don't know why did she want to be in this tag team? Because I'm pretty sure if you gave her the choice of her own singles match against a legend, she probably would take that over being in a tag team with fucking Naomi. You can replace her with somebody else. All right, I'm sure you could probably find somebody to team with Naomi for WrestleMania. You're not going to have a problem there. Or if Lita has to wrestle, you're not going to give it to Shotzi because she's too low on the totem pole. You could have gave it to Rhea Ripley. That would have been a great spot for her too. But they seem to be not interested in using Lita again. I'm saying, like, why not? Why not? Why? That doesn't make sense. If you know, look, I know her match in Saudi Arabia wasn't the best match that she could possibly do, and she botched a lot. We're getting people into the building over the name now. Fucking Pat McAfee is there. His match is probably not going to be that great. And Logan Paul is going to be there. His match is likely not going to be fucking Steamboat and Flair either. And you have fucking, what's the name? Johnny Knoxville is going to be there. And if you tell me that shit's going to be Hogan versus Rock, you got to be kidding me. You know? Now, at least Johnny Knoxville has a storyline that people are going to be interested in. You can create a storyline that people can be interested in. But speaking of Pat McAfee, him and Austin Theory got into a bit of a tiff before the Intercontinental Championship match, as Austin Theory just kind of wandered down to the ringside and just was hanging out near Pat McAfee just to antagonize him. Then, he got in front of Pat McAfee and said he doesn't deserve to be in a main event of WrestleMania against him. Smacked him again. And then Pat McAfee jumped over the announce table and attacked him. This was very good, as Pat McAfee just kind of lost his shit and was beating the hell out of Austin Theory. And Austin Theory ran away. Then a bunch of security guys came out there as Pat McAfee was walking towards Austin Theory again. As he got a little too close, Austin Theory, of course, faked like he wanted to fight him and got held back by security dudes. So that left Michael Cole to call the Intercontinental Championship match by himself. So that is SmackDown. SmackDown, as Pat McAfee would say. An eventful show, even though literally felt like nothing happened on this show. They're still building to WrestleMania. This felt like a filler week. They didn't put a lot of emphasis on anything. We know the Tag Team Championship match, at least we know the idea of it. The Intercontinental Championship match is still not spoken for. Ricochet won the belt, but will he be defending the belt? And if he is going to defend the belt against who? Who? I don't know. I would really like if Ricochet got a match at WrestleMania. I would really like that. That would be very nice. It would be very generous of the McMahons. I mean, you got the building for 2 days. You might as well go ahead and use it, fill it up, do as many people in matches as you can. And just in case some of these celebrity matches turn out to be absolute burnouts that you want to cut short, have some guys ready. Have some guys ready that can go out there. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of mechanics and, technicians and high-flying shit and all that kind of stuff, but I enjoy it sometimes. And WrestleMania should feature some great fucking wrestling, That's kind of the showcase of the Immortals. It's what everybody's going to be watching. You could showcase some of your better wrestlers at some point. You could have your big marquee, big meaty men slapping meat, Brock versus Roman match. You can have your celebrity sideshow freak match. But you also got to have, a good, great singles match between two high-level athletes fighting for something that matters. And I think the Intercontinental Championship as well as the United States title are good opportunities for that. Stop with the 6-man tags and 4-way tags and all that shit, man. It's like, come on. We could tell you just trying to stuff people in this shit at this point. Stop trying to stuff people on this show and actually build a proper card. They'll never actually get that done. We just do it the best they can. And the best they can do is Butch. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.